So, have you wondered what your retirement trajectory would look like? What I mean by that is how your withdrawals will affect your retirement account balance over time once you hit retirement. So, we start our lives, studying, doing whatever, so that we can get a job, and then during our working careers, it's our accumulation phase to get wealth into our nest egg, and then finally we retire. And a lot of us plan for it and try to track it and do all that stuff. But sometimes it's nice to just see it visually. So my previous video, I'd made a tool that was based on my own set of facts to see when I should take Social Security. And it basically said that for me, it was better to take it at 62 earlier and reduce the amount I would have to withdraw from my own account and let that grow a little bit longer. And of course, it was my own set of facts, so it's different for you and for anyone else. But that was what it was. So what I did was I kind of took that tool and I went ahead and made another tool that kind of give you a trajectory of your retirement account and what it does under several different factors. So what I have here on screen, which I'm going to project behind me, and I'm also going to make this a downloadable link so you can play with it on your own, is basically a tool that allows you to visualize your retirement account and how it looks over time. All right, so let me just kind of go into it. I call it my inflation adjusted retirement trajectory projection. So yeah, that's a mouthful, but you're seeing it on screen here, and I have to kind of zoom out a little bit on the computer here as I'm recording the video so that you can see everything in one view. But if it's too small for you, you can always adjust the zoom of your browser so that it's it's bigger and it's more legible. But I'm going to zoom back out and kind of talk through all of the different factors and give you a demo of how it works. And then I'll talk about how you can use it with your own set of facts and what you have to watch out for, okay? So this is basically the main chart here. And let me zoom back out to get everything in the screen. And I'll kind of talk through what it does. So the first thing you see is the projection of your retirement account. And this is adjusted for inflation. So it's not based on the dollar amount that you would see in your account, but it takes into account the inflation factor, which I'll show you in a bit, and show you kind of real dollars even out in the future, okay? So that's one thing to keep in mind. These icons down here are just kind of little reminders of when certain event happens. So I have a little palm tree for your retirement age, dollar sign for when your Social Security starts, the cross for Medicare, and the house for when you've paid off the mortgage. And then it also shows you the final NPV of your retirement account. Now it's just net present value if you're not in the finance world. And for the chart here, since I'm 45, I took it out to 100. But if you know a little bit about Excel, you can tweak it to your needs. These icons down here are just laying on top of the graph. So if you think that you're going to retire much later than 60, because that's what I put it here just as a reminder more than anything else, you can drag it to wherever your actual age is, just so that when you adjust the factors, you have these little landmarks that remind you of where the major events are. All right, so let me kind of talk through how this works. So the key is that you have these factors that you can change up here, okay? And I know some of this got cut off because I'm zooming out, so let me talk through it, and then when you get it on your computer and zoom in, you'll see it a lot better. So on the left-hand side here, we have three factors. The first is your aggressive rate of return. So this is the rate of return that you would expect to get if you were invested in stocks primarily, okay? I put 8%, it's pretty conservative. Somebody has asked me if that's even if that's realistic for the next decade. And I think it is, maybe a little bit high, but when I think about an aggressive rate, it's price appreciation and dividends. So I think, I think it's possible. A conservative earnings rate is more like money markets or bonds or fixed income. I put that at 3%. Again, you can change that to 2.5 to whatever you're comfortable with. Last one in the first column is withdrawal rate, and I put that at 4%. Now, the basic study, the Trinity study, is that if you withdraw at 4% and you have a healthy mix of stocks to fixed income, something like 80-20, you're going to have a 90% chance that your portfolio will outlast you, basically. Next column, inflation. So in my model here, I've set it at 2.5%. Next one is Social Security age. So this is the age that you would withdraw Social Security. And I pegged it at 62, 67, and 70. And it's a drop-down list. And I'm going to go through and kind of play with the model here, just so you can see how it affects the chart and the balances, okay? And then last one in the second column is withdrawal growth. What I mean by this is that you may start withdrawing from your account a certain amount. Let's pick an easy number I can do in my head, $100,000 a year. In the model right now, I have a 5% growth. That just means that if you took out 100,000 last year, next year you're going to take out 105,000. And then the year after that, 5% more than that. So maybe 110, 111,000, right? What this does is it kind of keeps your spending power a little bit higher than inflation. That's all it does. But these are all adjustable. And then the last column is just your actual Social Security benefit at different ages. So the first one is Social Security at 62, at 67, and at 70. And I made these numbers up, 22,000 a year at 62, 32 at full retirement age, and then if you wait, it's 40. But your specific number, you need to take that from your Social Security statement and plug it in, okay? But the idea here is that anything in blue, and I'll go through the rest of the columns below, is meant for you to adjust. So let's go ahead and play around with this. And let me kind of talk through how this is currently set up. So this is for someone who is 45 in 2020, so this year. And that's the only reason this particular row is colored pink. So someone who's 45, they've been working for about 20 years now. They put some money away, maybe not quite as high as they should have done, all through the first 20 years of working, but it's better than what most have saved up. And this person has $500,000 in their account at this moment. Okay? And then the contribution is an annual contribution, and this is meant to represent what you're going to put in, as well as any match or employer contribution that you would get. And for this particular person, I'm putting in $15,000 total. And I kind of just came up with this individual. So for me, the candidate was making $100,000 in income a year. So the recommendation is to say 15% of your salary. So that's why I had 15,000. And if you were making 100,000 at age 45, it is conceivable that you would have had $500,000 saved up if you were even saving a little bit. Okay. The next column is just the aggressive percent. What this is how much of your portfolio is in aggressive growth. And this one you can change. I put it that it's 100% while you're working. And generally that's what you want to do. And conservative is calculated off of your aggressive. So if you say it's 100%, then you're gonna have 0, right, in the conservative. If you drop aggressive down to 90, then of course this will change to 10 automatically. The next couple of columns are calculated automatically. So this is the gain from your aggressive funds, the gains from your conservative funds, and the total gains, which doesn't look like I have calculated, doesn't really matter. It doesn't get used, so I probably should have deleted that column. And then next column is your withdrawal from your retirement account. Social Security amount, and then your ending balance, and your adjusted ending balance. So it's just adjusted for inflation. Annual income, your personal exemption, this is for tax purposes, monthly income, net after taxes, and then adjusted monthly income. And lastly, required minimum distribution factor. So let's kind of talk about these two, and then I'll play with the model a little bit here. So net monthly income is going to take your annual income, it's going to deduct your exemptions, but not any other deductions, and it's going to calculate the tax for you, so it really is a net. The adjusted is just taking that net monthly income and bringing it back to today's dollars using the inflation factor, okay? Like I said, I'll go into that a little bit more, but let's just play with the model. So for this individual here, let's go ahead and see what happens when we change some of the scenario factors. Okay? So I said that they started with 500,000. What if they had something less, like 350? So I put in 350,000, and I'm gonna hit enter and watch what happens to the graph, right? You see it reduced a little bit, okay? Let's say that you also think that inflation is not gonna be 2.5%, but you think it's gonna be higher, like 3%. Well, put that in, okay? And you'll see that the chart gets adjusted. Let's say that you think the aggressive growth rate is too high at 8%, and you think that it's more realistic to model it on 7%. So we're gonna put in 7. Now keep in mind that you're gonna be using today's rates, but because of the inflation factor here, it'll get adjusted properly in the model, so you don't have to worry about it. So use today's numbers in the assumptions up here, and everything else will calculate. So you can see that even though when I put in 7, it looks like the chart jumps up, you gotta be careful that you're looking at the axis over here, okay? Because the axis is also adjusted. Let me show you that again, okay? So when I do 8, it seems like it dropped down, but if you look on the left, the maximum value has now jumped to 1.4 million. So really, at this point here, you're at like, 1.05 million or something. Whereas if I change this to 7, the whole chart, did it shift? Yeah, it shifted up. But you can see that the maximum on the chart is 1 million. So at that high point again, it's only about 0.9 million instead of 1.05 or something, okay? So keep that in mind as you're playing around, because the model will automatically adjust, and it looks like it's not making sense. You have to look at every number, okay? Because the chart, I can't fix it to an axis. Part of that is that I don't know who's going to use this and what they'll do with it, right? So that's basically how you would adjust this. So let me take this back to like an 8% aggressive rate. I'm going to change inflation back to 2.5%. I picked some of these numbers because I kind of think that they are realistic. But of course, when I give this to you guys, you can do whatever you want. Now, I'm going to also change the growth rate. I started with 5%, which is double inflation, but that may be a little high, right? And the growth rate would mean that you're taking more out of your nest egg. So if you're concerned and you want a margin of safety, we can adjust this down to like 4%. It's still higher than inflation, so it basically means that your buying power is still going to keep up, but it's a little bit safer, right? And we can see the effect because if I put 5%, that NPV up here in green is at 194,000. This is at age 100, okay? But when I drop the growth rate of the withdrawal every year to 4%, you can see that it's jumping by more than half. So it goes from 194 or whatever to 305,000. So it does make a difference. The other thing that you can adjust is that you can go to your withdrawal rate, and you may say, well, 4% is pretty high. I'm gonna put it at 3.8 and see what happens, okay? And you can see that at 3.8, the final NPV jumps up to 313 from 305. Not a huge difference. If it makes you feel better, do it. I probably would stay around the 4% withdrawal rate if I was getting these returns. So yeah, that's just playing with the model. Now let's adjust this last column, which is Social Security. Let's say that, you know, in your case, you're not making 100,000, and you know you live in a place where cost of living is low, so your salary may give you a very nice lifestyle, but you're not making 100 grand. So your benefits may be a lot lower than this. Well, not a lot, but it'll be lower than this. So let's change this to some other numbers at the different ages. So if you're going to take it early, let's say that in your case you're getting 19,000 instead of 22. Maybe at full retirement age you drop down to 30,000. Okay, and at 70, if you wait, you may be at 38,000. Okay, again, I'm making these numbers up. But the point here is that when you adjust these, the entire model adjusts. Okay, so now that I've changed these factors to 19, 30, and 38, and I left Social Security at 67, which is full retirement age, this means that you should see in this column right here that Social Security is 30,000 when you start taking it. And in fact, there it is, all right? So if we were to adjust this, so let me show you what happens when I adjust this to 62. Okay, so at 62, you see that you start taking it earlier, and you see that it's reflecting this number, okay? If I were to change this, 19,500, okay, the model would automatically adjust, okay? So everything is all linked and all adjusted. Let me go through some of these columns in particular and what you may want to do when you're playing with this for yourself, okay? So, like I said before, anything in blue you can change. So obviously, I'm starting this year in 2020, but you may not be 45. You may be 40, you may be 35, you may be 50, okay? What you can do is you can adjust this column based on your current age, and you only have to change the age in 2020, the rest of it will calculate. So let me demonstrate that. Let's say that you're 40 instead of 45. So just put in 40, and the rest of this will adjust. See that? Okay. I'm gonna bring this back to 45. Okay. Contribution, same way. You adjust the pink cell for this column, and the rest of it will automatically update. Now, one thing on contribution is that I did assume that you're gonna stop working regardless at 65 or having an income. So you may retire at 60, but you're gonna stop getting an income at 65, and therefore you're not gonna have any contributions, right? Because in order to have contribution, you have to have what's called earned income. So even though you may have retirement income, that doesn't count. You can only contribute if you have earned income. If you're gonna be working longer or less than that, and you wanna take the deductions away or add to it, you will have to manually adjust the rest of this column. That's just the points for you to be aware of. This blue column, the aggressive percent, right? I said that you only have to enter the aggressive amount of your portfolio, and the conservative amount will then adjust automatically. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So, this is someone at 65 having a mix of 85-15, okay, aggressive to conservative. If that's too high for you, you may say, I'm more comfortable with 75. So you put in 75, and what you see is that conservative automatically change, okay, to reflect that. So we can take this back. I put this column in blue, the ending balance, because you may want to be playing around with adding in additional income from other sources, right? So let's say that you have some sources of income from a rental or something. All you have to do is go into the formula here and add in an amount you want. So let's say you get 10,000 a year net from some income, like a property or something. You can just add it to this, and it's above your portfolio, but you can add it or deduct it, okay? So that's why I mark it in blue, but normally you shouldn't have to touch this ending balance because it's automatically calculated. This green one is just the same as this, except it's taking the net present value based on the inflation rate, right? So you can see, I'll give you an example so you can see it. So for this model, we have this person having an ending balance of $1,085,000 by age 55. But that's in today's dollars. But if you look at the adjusted balance, it's actually $845,000. And that's because $1,085,000, 10 years from now, is only worth $845 in today's dollars. In other words, the buying power is only worth $845,000. This is directly affected by your inflation rate, okay? So let me go ahead and keep an eye on the cell. I'm gonna increase inflation to like 5%, something really high so you can see the change. What happens is that if you have high inflation, then as the years goes on, your buying power is gonna get lowered in today's dollars by a bigger amount, right? So if I change this from 2.5% to 5%, that 845 is only worth 659,000 in today's dollars, okay? So you can see how big an effect inflation has. So, and of course that gets adjusted in the graph as well, but yeah, that's how that works. So you don't have to change that green column. I'm just giving you a little bit more detail. I'm gonna change this inflation factor back to 2.5%. I think that's more realistic. Personal exemption, you may wanna change this. I just put 12,000 here when you start retiring. But what you want to do is you want to match your withdrawal. So let's say that, I probably should have this column in blue, not this one. But let's say that you're not going to retire at 60, but you're going to retire at 65. Then you would zero out these amounts and start your withdrawal in the row for age 65, okay? At whatever your withdrawal rate is. If you decide to retire earlier, so in the model I have 60, but if you say I want to do it at 55, using the rule of 55 or just taking early retirement, you just have to start your withdrawals a little bit earlier, okay? So the exemption, this is for a single person taking the standard deduction, which is $12,000. And this is important because this goes into the calculation of your net income. Because if you think about it, 58.9 is almost 60,000. That's going to work out to be about 5,000 a month on a gross basis, but you can see that the net's a little bit less because it's taking into account taxes. Okay? So on the exemption, if you're a single person and you're good with this, great, and you have no other deduction, leave it alone. But if you're going to take itemized deduction, and you have things like local property tax, you have mortgage interest, and other items, charitable donations, that's going to push you above the standard deduction of 12,000. You can just change 12,000 to whatever your standard deduction is, and it'll get picked up in the calculation for net monthly income. Adjusted monthly income, again, the same concept as before. These are dollars in the future, so this is showing you the equivalent in today's dollars. I don't want you to get too hung up on this because you may look at it and go, wow, I can cover my expenses if my net was $4,400. But if it was $3,000, I'm screwed, right? Because I have mortgages, I have utilities and whatever. The reason I don't think you should get too hung up on this is that your biggest expense will be housing. So unless you're renting, it's not gonna go up, or unless you have a variable mortgage. Because if you have a mortgage, it is casted in today's dollars, right? When you set up the fixed mortgage, and hopefully you have a fixed mortgage, your payments are set for the entire term of the loan, right? So even though the buying power of the dollar may go down in the future, you're kind of locked into that mortgage payment, so you should be fine. So don't worry too much about adjusted monthly income. The last factor though, the RMD factor, you do want to make sure that it's correct. So let me kind of talk through this because this may take a little bit more detail. Like I said, I started this for someone who's 45, and this is their RMD factor at age 45, and it's filled in correctly as they age. RMD factor is basically your life expectancy from the Uniform Life Table that the IRS publishes. And down below, there are some links that will let you look at that and see what your life expectancy is if you were starting earlier than 45. But the key here is that if you adjust your age, you have to make sure that you move this column so that it matches, okay? And the reason that's important is that with the new Secure Act for retirement that passed, the age for required minimum distribution has been increased to 72. Previously it was 7.5, but now it's 72. And in my model here, your withdrawal is affected by RMD. So basically, what my model does is that it checks to see that if your withdrawal that you're specifying, okay, from age 72 onwards, is lower than the RMD, then you're going to take the RMD, because the RMD is required minimum distribution, right? You can always take more, but you have to at least take RMD. So starting at age 72, the model is calculating RMD and comparing it to whatever factors you put up here. And if the RMD is more, it's going to plug that in instead, okay? And that's why you see, you know, in later years, right, why the withdrawal is growing so large, okay? So it is important for you to match up the RMD to your age if you are going to move it. That's the key takeaway here. Right now it's set up for someone who is 45 in 2020, but it should be easy for you to adjust that. Down below, I have a bunch of links that are resources. They're really good resources for you to check out. One of them talks about RMD specifically, so you can check that out if you have any questions. And then lastly, there's a tab on here that's called the tax calculator, okay? So this is taking into account the current tax rate and tax brackets and all of that. And the way that I did it was that I set it up for someone who is single, okay? But I do have the breakdown here for someone who would file as head of household or married filing jointly. And if you know Excel, you can adjust, copy these values over to the bracket, because it's really using this to calculate taxes. If you want to play around with tax calculation, you can do it down here, but I won't get into that too much, okay? Anyways, I'm going to post a direct link to this as part of the video here. You can download it and have fun with it. I spent a lot of time on the logic of some of these formulas because they can be quite complicated. You have to kind of think through different scenarios. So I would appreciate it if you find this valuable, just to give me a like. If you're feeling generous, I'm gonna have my Venmo account down there. Buy me a coffee, give me $5, $3, whatever, it doesn't really matter. You don't have to give me anything, give me a like. Likewise, if you're going through this and seeing that there's an error, send me a note and I'll adjust it, all right? Hope you find it useful. Thanks, see ya.